So that comes into concepts of called methods of protected growing. How can I protect my plants? So we can have glass houses, cold frames, cloches, polytunnels, or cop covers. Any of these, and we'll look at them individually, help us to extend our growing season. And that can make the difference between you having, like, say, fresh vegetables year-round or not. And especially from the concept of earthships, where people are now attaching the greenhouse to their home. So I live in a temperate climate, but I can have fresh salad every day because my greenhouse is actually attached to my home. So we'll look at that in more detail. So though that's not on there, you could add earthship as a concept. So protected growing, let's look at a glass house. Glass houses are typically more commercialized, but what's interesting is that now they're getting where you can actually buy a glass house inexpensively. So you can have one shipped to your house from Amazon, if you so choose, in the United States for almost like $100. So the one there on the bottom, $100, it comes in a flat pack, and I put it together, and I have a little glass house. And I can start with that, and then I can add 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I can't afford to have a really large glass house, which is going to be our most protected growing, we could start with a small one and add on. So these are protected growings, and they take advantage of photosynthesis. So later, once we look at what we can use, we'll try to see how does it help us with photosynthesis. So cold frames are very inexpensive. This one's super simple. There's just some hay bales, and they took an old window from a torn down house, and if you set the window, during the daytime, you can open the window, and it won't get hot. But right before the evening, maybe 2 hours, you close the window, the sun shines in, heats it up, and then that'll keep it from having frost overnight. So when you come back in the morning, you won't have frost. So that'll be a protected growing situation. So they're basically cheap, they're easy to build, and you personally can regulate the temperature. So very simple thing. So do-it-yourself cold frames. These are a little bit more permanent. So someone has gone through the trouble to actually do a little bit better job, and they have them against the wall of their home, so the thermal mass of their home, and then the cold frame. So not only can the cold frame protect from frost, but when you closed it and heated it, it actually can heat your home at the same time. So these can also be used for hardening off seedlings. So what does that mean? I grow seedlings, say, in my kitchen window, and then I move them to the cold frame, get them used, and then I could move them out, something like that. So they've been very easy, can be attached to glass houses. And these are another type called cloches. So the growing season extended here with more control over your environmental conditions. So at night, right before nighttime, I'll go and I'll put my cloche. And some people, as simply, would use a water bottle. So if I take a 2-liter water bottle and I just cut off the bottom and I stick it over my little seedling, I can make sure that it's warm at night. In the morning, I just pick up the Coke bottles. So that could be simple. So they're used to provide protection at critical growing periods, and they're easily transportable and even stackable. So easy to take care of. So these are a little bit more what they call ornamental cloches. So people start to make really nice, pretty ones, even as simple as a leaded glass cloche, even stained glass cloches, and I put it in my garden. Very, very nice. Or we can have protection provided in different ways. So here we can see polytunnels. So polytunnels have become very inexpensive, quite do-it-yourself. You can buy kits, all the parts and pieces very, very simply. And with the advent of PVC pipe that you can bend, you can make these in like one weekend. So here's a PVC pipe bent polytunnel, very, very simple. And they can come in various shapes and sizes. Again, people then start to add these or hook them onto their house. So I may have a polytunnel attached to my garage, for instance, or I can have a polytunnel onto my home. So if we do this, what are we trying to protect? Well, we have air, soil, and water temperatures are elevated, and the plants are not subjected to the elements, meaning, for instance, frost. So we could also look at cover crops. So this is another type of way to protect a particular crop. They may actually plant a crop that gets taller, so that would protect through the lower crop, for instance. So if we do that, this cover is laid on top, and it provides frost protection. So at night, they bring out the cover like a blanket, cover the plants, and during the daytime, they pull the cover back, and then they can have the plants have a light availability. So here we go, some more do-it-yourself situations. Here's a simple on the right. We can see a simple, just a piece of black fabric, like what they actually use as textile fabric to stop weeds. And in this instance, they cut it and they lay it around, and during the daytime, the soil would heat up. So with the sunlight, we can get an increased soil heating that can help us overnight. So these are just examples of what you can do to help your seedlings. And this was sitting. So if we do buy a glass house or a polytunnel, we need to think about where do we put it? How do we sit it in relationship to your sun angles, right? So we want to avoid shading from buildings. So you need to think about how close is it to a building, and any shade from a building would reduce its temperature. We need to think any vegetation that may be nearby, or consider other lighting, especially in time of winter. So if it's in winter, we'll see later in another, people will add lights. So you can put in growing lights into your polytunnel to assist, especially if you're in a very, very north condition, you don't have enough light. So the orientation is very easy. You need to look at your winter solstice, okay, the longest day of the year, so December 21st. So the orientation, it's best to have structures running north and south, typically, and even for more light distribution. So here we see the angles, ideal angles, dependent on your latitudes and longitudes, so that's quite easy to find out. If you go to a website called suncalc.net, so all you'll need to do is look on Google Earth, where do you live, and it'll have the latitude and longitude. And then you type in the latitude and longitude on suncalc.net, and it will fly over Google Earth and outline the sun angle over your property, right? Then it has a slider. You put the winter solstice, okay, December 21st, and it'll give you the sun angle on December 21st. You also can get, that's the lowest sun angle. You also can get the highest sun angle if you like, or the sun angle on any day, 24 hours a day. It'll calculate it. But June 21st, being the summer solstice, is also an interesting time. So I have my highest sun angle of the year, my lowest sun angle of the year, overlaid over my Google Earth image. And then I put that into my plan, and it looks very nice, right? So that'll give you an idea of what the sun angle actually would be over your home. So you can avoid frost pockets. So this is basically called cold air drainage. So if I'm on a hillside, the cold air will settle and drain to the lower point. So I need to be conscious that if I put my greenhouse inside the lower point and the air drained down, it would freeze my greenhouse. Same with our homes. We don't want to put our homes inside of the lowest point if we live in a temperate climate. So here, vegetation can sometimes help us. We could actually create a hedgerow to stop the cold air draining, or the hedgerow could divert the cold air around my particular home. So this is going to be at the base of a hill, and it doesn't become a frost pocket. We can see this when we sit glass houses. Again, we can see here trees and sun. So shelter, winds can be a problem. So strong wind may buffet or damage my glass or polytunnels, especially or adverse in wind conditions. So a nice tree line or shelter belt, hedgerow, can help to protect my polytunnel. And we may have to think, if we're doing permaculture like in the future, when I first buy a property, there may be no shelter, and it may be not easy for me to have a polytunnel in my particular condition. So I might have to plant my shelter belt so that in the future I could add the polytunnels. So think about that. So if we look at this, this brings us to the concept of environmental factors we can use to control, or in our case, try to maximize photosynthesis. So how can I get the most photosynthesis out of the light? So certain environmental conditions favor the growth of plants, and by understanding and providing these, we can maximize growth, and plants can grow up to 3 times faster in optimal conditions than if, say, left outside. So that can be a lot when he says, how much can I grow this year and I can sell? And if I can grow 300% more than you can grow, right? Well, I have more food for my family, and or I have more to sell.